Have with us today Theresa Harkins-Schulz, who is Senior Vice President of Customer Experience at Inspirus. Did I pronounce the name of the company correctly? I
You
did, didn't
did.
I?
Yes, you
Okay,
did.
fantastic. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. And you know what? We had an awesome discussion a couple of years ago, just a couple of months ago, just joking, but it was a while back. But we covered a bunch of ground around what's. Let me see if I can. In what I'm going to ask you to do is kind of keep me honest here. But I think what we talked about was what's the what is the employee experience around technology? What are some of the parallels between their experience at work with their HCM technology versus the technology they're just dealing with all the time? We talked about sort of that perennial subject matter of HR getting a seat at the table. Now what? These sorts of things. Where would you like to start?
Sure, it's some exciting stuff. It was a great conversation, and thanks, Brent, for inviting me today. I think first, just let's talk about experience because even within my title, right? Today, I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience, but oftentimes people will say, well, are you customer success? Is it customer experience? How do those things relate? And I think that businesses today, we're all looking to make sure that our customers are successful. We have customer success organizations that may service call centers, they may include account management, they may include technology implementations, but ultimately, that is just one subset of the experience that we as business provide overall to the customers and the employees that we serve. At Inspirus, we are looking to help organizations engage and motivate their employees utilizing different technology tools and suites, as well as recognition practices. I've been in HR. Kind of ended up there like many people was just oh well, you want to do some recruiting, okay, that sounds good, let me give that a try. And from there it kind of snowballed. And I've enjoyed spending time in many of the different towers within HR, but ultimately, the lens that I like to look at things is really from a view of systematic thinking and not just what do we want to do and are we checking the box to get it done, but how does it make people feel? What are we asking them to do in order to achieve that? And all of those things, experiences are really about the feeling, the emotion, the interactions that we can have. Technology plays a huge part in that. And that was where you and I had a lot of our conversation last time.
Yeah, you hit on a bunch of stuff here. Made me think of a bunch of things. So first of all, so I'm just gonna lay them out here, and then let's try to knock them down one by one. If we get to them all, that's great. If not, that's fine. One idea is around employee motivation. Employee motivation. I've been thinking a lot about that recently, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about your philosophy around that, and also the experience of the employee, which in my opinion is very much wrapped up with almost synonymous with the idea of employees' feelings, right?
Yes.
And how, yeah, I was talking with actually let's sit on that for a little bit. I was
Sure.
talking with a former colleague of mine, stay in touch with, um, and I was talking with him about our concept of concrete and abstract HCM, the idea that there's two hemispheres to HCM and both matter, you need both. And he threw a curveball and he said at me and he said, HR it's all abstract. It's all about employee feelings. And of course, we were sort of drawing for the sake of the conversation, we were calling abstract HCM and employee feelings essentially the same thing. And I think that
Mhm.
works even objectively.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really interesting. What are your thoughts about that around employee experience is about the employee feelings, and HR may be all about employee feelings, like 100%. What do you think about
Yeah, so I have mixed emotions about that.
that?
And I'll just share a quick story that kind of frames up, the mixed emotions that I have. But When I started off working for Delta Airlines several years ago, I helped design and deploy their recognition programs for their employees within that organization. And Delta was one of the early adopters at really taking a systematic approach to recognition and having it woven into the framework and practices and training and onboarding and everything that was already happening within the organization. And I joined a professional organization, and what I found was a lot of great people with a lot of good heart, but their approach to this was around, I labeled them campfire girls, because they were really looking at things from, I'm planning a party, I am in HR and I am all about making employees feel good and planning a party. I am looking, to be the campfire girl and, gather everybody around to sing songs, get together and roast marshmallows. And on one hand, this is where the mixed part comes in. I love the fact that what those professionals were doing was evoking emotion within their workplace. What I was challenged with, and where I get challenged with HR getting just equivalated to the feeling aspect, is that if you don't also make it purposeful, if you don't weave it into the practices of the organization, it's always an afterthought. It's a nice to have and not a must have in the organization. And so that's where I believe the experience is key, and HR is delivering that, but you can't only focus on that abstract feeling side. You
Mhm.
have to also focus on, how am I going to achieve that outcome or those thoughts or those behaviors, and what tools am I going to use to help incentivize or motivate or to create those moments and experiences to happen in the organization. So I relate. It just took some time for me really to pull together, getting in touch with my softer side, so to speak, and
Okay.
understand, because I was very, I was the nerdy technology one that just wanted to be behind the computer, and I don't need those feeling things. That's for other people. But
Right.
it all comes together, and they're very interrelated.
Mm. That's interesting. And so so that actually fits in with a couple of things that I so there was one conversation I had with another person recently, and as you were talking, I was racking my brains, kind of going through the catalog, say who is it with, because it was a connection there. Um, a fellow who works in psychometrics
Okay.
around best fit for culture, around,
Mhm.
what is your employer culture at your organization, figuring that out. What is your culture from a psychometric standpoint, and then hiring for best fit for that. And the example was, a oh let's use an example outside the HCM industry. Let's say you're an engineer at General Motors, right? And and there's a certain culture there, and maybe let's say BMW is hiring engineers. Maybe you're an HVAC engineer, right?
Mhm.
For General Motors, they're hiring engineers at BMW, and just because you were a successful HVAC engineer at GM does and you might really know your stuff and all of that, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fit in the culture at BMW for HVAC, right? And so we're looking at the wrong things when we're recruiting. We're not necessarily looking at the right things. We're looking at the stuff that, at first blush seems like the stuff we should be looking
Right.
at, but we should be hiring for culture. But the other thing that we talked about that was super interesting, it was sort of a tangent. It was a funny tangent during the conversation. It wasn't a tangent, but it was an aside. You know, employer culture is not pizza and beer on Friday. you know, it's not campfire girls.
Right.
It's those are nice things to do, but you're not creating a that's a completely just that is not culture. It comes from a good place, right? A
Yeah.
company that says, yeah, I want to put a foosball table in rec room for my employees. That's certainly not a bad thing. You're not being a bad employer by doing that, but you're misunderstanding culture.
Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, hiring people for culture has such a great impact because ultimately, if we don't, as individuals, feel like we are aligned or that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose within a team, no matter what our skill and competency set, we're always going to be pushing against the grain. I, myself have experienced that in my career, just even over the long-standing debate of being a remote employee versus being one in the office, right? There's a lot of tension that can come into that. And if an organization has a culture value of face time or presence in the office, it's very difficult to kind of adopt into that remote work practice and bringing that together. So I think culture is very important. And culture really, those are things that we do to celebrate our culture or to have stories or exhibit ways that we can visibly show that we care about our employees or that we're concerned for our employees, but it's everything else that's happening all along that journey, right? Having a foosball table is great,
Mm.
but if we don't either allow our employees the time to utilize it, or if we don't encourage that kind of 5-minute break because it refreshes, the brain and gets people thinking and moving in different directions, and we encourage those breaks, those are the aspects of our culture. Something sitting there doesn't make a difference, right? We have to help people understand what it is we expect them to do with it and why they can use it, because otherwise it becomes a question mark in people's minds, and then people go to the rigidity of, well, we need rules around that. We're going to need a sign up sheet for when people can use the foosball table,
Right.
and instead of letting people really self-regulate and use their best judgment in these situations and letting them know, we have expectations for you to get your job done, and you've been hired because
Mm.
you're competent, because you have demonstrated that you're a great HVAC engineer, but you also have some freedom and flexibility in how you behave. We expect you to collaborate. We expect you to be honest, and we want you to bring your best work. Help us know what that means to you in the workplace and how to exhibit that. And I think that's where a lot of HR organizations can kind of miss the mark, because the HR or the business itself, right? They just take it to such of an extreme of looking for rigidity or rules or a perfect formula,
Yeah.
but sometimes you just got to let go.
I think you really hit on the head with that last one, a perfect formula. I, I don't think one exists. I got a couple of questions around. Well, first of all, a couple of observations around. If we're gonna let's stay focused on the foosball table because I think it's a great,
Sure.
it's just a great visual for this whole concept here. A company, an organization, an employer could put a foosball in the the meeting room, and again, it's a good thought, but it's not really understanding culture. It's but you said some things, right? So for instance, yeah, if we're encouraging people to use the foosball table, then yeah, if we have that's giving them the break that they need. There's all sorts of science around this. I can't cite
Mhm.
anything off the top of my head, but there is around taking a break or
Absolutely.
going for. I have a culture of one. I work from home too. I have a culture of one. I try to go for a run a couple days a week. I do a workout routine a couple other days a week. It's just like some time. I listen to music and then I'm back at my computer and I'm focused. But if you're putting that foosball table without understanding that, then you didn't understand culture. But if you did understand that, then then the foosball table is a culture tool, right? A. B.
Right.
What are the components of employer culture? What are they? I don't
Well, the
know.
first component is trust.
Okay.
The first, I think trust is a fundamental aspect of culture in the workplace. Secondly, I think it goes around purpose and then an understanding of the job that you need me to do. And I think that piece alone, if I understand what it is you've asked me to do and I know what tools are available for me to get that job done, we've established a trust bond that starts the process, right? Because then it really drives into, I mean, some of this really goes back to good old friend Maslow, right? Hierarchy of needs, and
Yes.
establishing that psychological safety in the workplace. Those are the first components of it. The trust, knowing what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, understanding how I fit into the picture. Those are all aspects, of the workplace. And secondly is, how do we want people to behave? And then are we holding people, accountable to those behavior standards and encouraging, both the positive and, providing feedback when necessary on negative or, behaviors that need to be eliminated or minimized in the workplace to accelerate others. I think people are really open to the feedback, and they're open to, growing in that culture piece. But I think those are some of the key aspects that kind of ring true when it comes to what is the base of culture, right? I mean, the base of culture is all about the trust and the relationship that you have with the employer. And then it goes to that next step, right? What about your manager? What about your peers? What about your job content? All of those pieces kind of blend together as you look to evolve a culture. And the behavior is absolutely paramount. How do people behave? You can't go out and say, we believe in collaboration, and have a team or individuals that function on an island and toss things over the fence. Collaboration means, we're going to generate ideas. We're going to use design thinking principles, or, whatever is important in that organization, to bring those aspects together to help evolve that culture piece.
How do you think? So first of all, you're singing my song. I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it really does. I mean, it does really apply. HCM. It's a great way of thinking about HCM, because what are the physiological and safety needs? You have compliance and payroll, time and attendance, and scheduling.
Yep.
Those are the things you cannot.
Base.
Yeah, and then once you have those in place, and working properly, so employees aren't afraid that they're not going to get paid this Friday because the payroll system messed up or something like that, right? Which I don't know anybody that personally that's happened to, but apparently it does, right?
It does.
So yeah, then you can focus on this employer culture stuff, right?
Yes.
You have sort of that, you've created the berth for yourself for that. But one other thing that I just wanted to hit on is, I actually forgot about this while we were talking. It reminded me, I actually saw an article. So I was looking through my history on LinkedIn because I actually shared it this weekend, and I just remembered. It was a story from Harvard Business Review. It's
Okay.
how company culture shapes employee motivation. You can go to my profile and see it in my post activity. But they said, what did they say? They worked with a number of different companies to determine what are the the motives around increasing performance at an organization. So and they said they found it was 5 or 6. So the positive ones they found were play, purpose, and potential. And there were 3 negative ones, which were emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia. And I won't bore the audience by reading through each of these, because I think it would take too long to read through them. But I mean, we can get the basic gist here. Play, purpose, and what was that other one? It was
potential.
Yes, potential. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. We're talking about self-actualization and esteem.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I was going to say the sense of belonging comes right into that as well, into the purpose and the potential. It is all about the self-actualization, and really. And I think as you look at more and more people entering the workplace, they are more concerned about what they are doing and what impact it's going to have on something, right? They want to understand that full picture. And I think that the job content, and for individuals to really find meaningful content, that's one of the number one ways to help them be motivated, right? If I don't like the job content, that I'm working on, I'm probably not going to be very happy in my job. I mean, they always say, the old adage is, find a career you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I mean, it really, it rings true when you look at trying to find something, that's that you feel a sense of purpose. I mean, potential really is, it's kind of like meaningful recognition. It boils back into the eye of the beholder, right? You may see my potential as one thing, but I may feel my potential to be something else. And at the end of the day, sometimes we just need someone to believe in us and, to help unlock doors and let us realize and find what our potential may be. Too many organizations have, especially in the HR and the exercises are good, but hypo pools and identifying, the small handful of people that, are the next leaders of the company, it's kind of an outdated practice. I mean, all of us have potential. And, when you look at bringing in gig workers and different people with different skill sets, you're looking at things on more of a almost a project or an ad hoc basis in the workplace, that you need to match purpose and potential with those skills and things that are happening in the business. And that really changes the way that HR is going to need to function, because those experiences, and then they're going to need technology to help them be able to match that up so they can deliver a better package to the employees, or they're not going to stick around.
We just sort of inadvertently segued into the next question that I was going to have for you. It's how can technology, that's right, nice. How does technology help with this? So let me just give you my thoughts on this. This is sort of a almost science fiction future of work idea. I actually wrote about this a month or so ago. That I think AI is going to play a huge role in formulating these constantly reforming teams. So I think if you think about projects in the future and the teams for them. Let me back up. Right now we have the organizational hierarchy or organizational structure. It's nobody's fault. It's just that we have sort of this analog understanding of it, a human analog understanding of what we need. And so we have position roles and we have titles and all these sorts of things. And we have teams that form, and these teams work on all sorts of projects, and they're sort of static. They're not technically static because they do change over time. They bring on new people. It's very slow, right? But in the future, we'll have sort of AI understanding the competitive landscape outside the organization and bringing in gig workers. And I mean, there's all sorts of variables that need to change. Regulatory landscape needs to adapt to this and all sorts of things. But potentially we could have organically forming teams informed by AI, and I would argue also psychometrics, very important, to create these best case scenario culture fit teams for certain projects, and then they would, convene and disband as necessary. I mean, at some point it's kind of hard to think about, but. What are your thoughts around how technology can maybe help this? Well, your thoughts on that, and then also, how can technology help today around employer culture?
Yeah, so, I think as we look towards the future, I think one of the things that, the pandemic has brought forward is that being flexible, having agility in our work practices is going to be absolutely paramount. I mean, in order to tackle business problems, right, we can't look at them through the same lens that we've done for several years. We need, new individuals with different thinking patterns. We need diverse teams. We need a variety of skill sets that may be a part of that team in order to solve problems, because having it be a job function or one person's type of assignment, it really doesn't produce the results that having a diverse group of people. And I think just the pace at which businesses are going to need to spin up, spin down, and respin, right, individuals into those teams, it's going to continue to grow because the challenges that people are facing and the resiliency that's needed out there, it is just it's not going to stop. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in that space for HR to really be thinking about, how are we going to support that? Many of us as that have grown up in HR are very used to, as describe the traditional hierarchy and the traditional structures. So when we look at that, well, what does that mean, right? Performance reviews, hierarchical decision making, those kinds of things, those slow processes down. They don't necessarily deliver to us the immediacy that most people want today. So that's where I kind of jump towards, or jump, to the other side of your question, is around, technology, and how can technology help with some of those pieces. And I really think that technology, whether it's in the HCM space or in motivation and recognition, the more flexibility that it can provide to employ trust within its employees or its leaders within an organization, to be able to in real time recognize, motivate, reward their employees for behaviors that they're seeing. They need that flexibility. I mean, it's latitude within limits, not just limits of what we can't do, but how can we do that? And that's really, it goes everything from the employee side, right? How do I have access to new content or learning content, or how do I see, wikis that are available within the organization so I can research and look, at things myself? I mean, technology really can, instead of being a limiting factor, it really can be an enabling factor for people to learn more, to look for their passions, to look for, other potential opportunities or other ways that they may need to be looking and thinking about that. And I think that's where, HR and looking at how organizational structures will evolve over the next couple of years to be inclusive, no matter where people are, no matter what they're doing. How do we bring them together so that we all are part of the same table when there's not really a table, right? We're on a
Yeah.
screen, we're sharing, we're, brainstorming ideas. How do you use, different tools, whether it be Miro or Mural or, one of these other, applications that are ideation tools. There's lots of ways to do it. And I think organizations just have to keep trying, fail fast, and continue to find opportunities to bring those into the workplace.
I think you're absolutely right. And just to distill what you just said into a few, I don't know, categories or so. One thing is, technology is definitely to enable it. It's enablement.
Yes.
So, we have, so we've, so we're evolving in terms of our understanding of what is important to the business process. We're constantly learning what's important. Our understanding of what is important to the business process is constantly expanding, I think, and refining. Okay.
Yes.
And so you talked about ideation. Well, technology can enable ideation, right? Can facilitate ideation between, folks who are remotely located, even before the pandemic, right?
Yes.
And then and then there's efficiency. There's an efficiency to ideation that the technology brings about, right? So this is something that came up in a user case that we looked at or talked about a couple months ago around employee recognition, right? So you look at I'm going to try to string together a bunch of things here. So you look at the physiological and the safety, the lower levels of the hierarchy of needs of Maslow's, right? And what are those? And those typically align with the things that accounting most often can actually translate into something that into a number that fits into the general ledger, right? Okay. Well, you think about employee recognition, though. There's an efficiency or a lack thereof to employee recognition. So you could have an organization whose culture values employee recognition, but they may have a very inefficient process for it, right? And so that is measured as an expenditure of labor, and that does make its way into the general ledger. And so you could bring a technology in to get rid of most of these inefficiencies in the employee recognition process, and that's measured as a gain in productivity, right? So I think that's yeah, exactly. And so this is not where I expected this to go, but I think it's interesting. Okay, that's where accounting ends. Oh yes, a gain in productivity. Well, what is the gain in productivity? Like, what did we gain, right? Aside from the time saved, right? What is the other side of the coin there? Because that definitely is important to business, even though it didn't get recorded in it never will get recorded in the general ledger until some time down the road when a new product is invented or brought to market that brings a lot of cash in for the company. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, no, sure. So I mean, I think measuring the productivity gains, is one aspect of, to your point, where recognition or where the measurement may end. But I think it goes back to where we started in the beginning. How do you bring that to measure the experience and how people are feeling? Because when we are feeling positive about what we are doing, right? If I'm working out and I'm seeing results, if I'm, able to do 10 burpees this week versus, one burpee a month ago, I feel better about myself. I feel better about what I'm doing. I'm seeing progress. And that emotional lift that we have has value in the workplace because I bring that attitude, I bring those thoughts, those behaviors to others. And so I think it really then, that measurement starts to flip into, well, how do we measure some of the softer side? How do we measure, whether it be ENPS and how employees feel about, whether or not they promote their organization or their relationship with their peers or their managers, or how do we help reward them and align them with their potential or their passions when they demonstrate those good things? I mean, that's where it has to continue. And it may not be a measurement that, an accounting function or someone that's a data analyst, may perform. It really gets to the manager relationship, because managers that are successful or leaders that are successful in the organization have a pulse on how their people, not only what they're doing, but how they're feeling about what they're doing. And that feeling piece is where the experience comes in, and how we can help to evolve and move those measurements in a new direction that maybe isn't always that hard cost, right? The hard ROI that's on the books. It's really those soft costs that are there.
I think you really hit it on the head there, though, with measurements, right? And one of the things that we talk about is the idea that, yeah, all of HCM is abstract. Even payroll, there's a huge amount of feeling behind getting paid, right? Even
Yes.
though it's also a number, it's also happens to be very quantifiable in terms of an actual dollar number, right? But it's this idea that every single aspect of HCM has a potential concrete expression, a potential measurement associated with it. Some of those are financially related numbers,
Right.
and some of them aren't, but we're still measuring, so we're translating everything to a number so that we can talk about it and gauge success, or gauge our progress is the word I was looking for. Yeah. Oh, this is super interesting stuff. um Customer experience, that's something we haven't touched on as much today, but I am curious that you were talking about a little bit toward the beginning, but
Sure.
what's your philosophy around that? I know, customer success, customer service, obviously, those are all sort of subsets of customer experience. Are there any parallels here between customer experience and employee experience?
Absolutely. I think that there's many cultures out there that do get it right, and they bring forward, kind of the mantra, your employees will never treat your customers better than you treat them. And it really, companies have to have that trust, have to have that agreement of what they're going to do, fair pay for the work that they're performing before they can even enter into how they're going to surprise, how they're going to delight, how they're going to deliver good customer service. I mean, we model what we see, and we spend so much of our working days at work
Yeah.
listening to, briefs or PowerPoint presentations on this project or this strategy or this new initiative. I'm going to model things that I see from leaders in the organization to customers, all the way from how do I solve problems? Am I empowered to solve them? Or do I have to get 3 approvals before I can actually solve your problem? So I do think there's ultimately a direct relationship between the employee experience and the customer experience. I mean, everybody is driving to help make customers successful. That's why we're in business. The function of customer success happens within organizations, but ultimately it's about those experiences that go from, how we as an employer in the employee relationship treat our employees. How do we recognize them? How do we motivate them? How do we give them a span of control over their work and their day? That bleeds directly into that interaction that they have with the customer. And the last thing I'll say on that one is it also is apparent. I don't know about you. How many times I call in somewhere and they say, oh, well, hold on, I have to check another system for that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you want that
It's the
information? That's
technology
not
part.
here. And this is where the technology part comes back into play. If we can't provide our employees the right tools to do the job that's going to give the customer the right experience, we
Yeah.
haven't set them up for success to begin
That's,
with.
yeah, that's a huge, huge point. You're so right. You're so right. You know, customers I think everyone is the organization's customer in a way, even the employees, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
they're
Yes.
not they're not buying your product, but they're you should treat them as customers. And you're absolutely right. We're getting to that chicken and the egg question around,
Mhm.
which comes first? Is it the vision or the technology? And I think that's the wrong question. I think it's all together. It's all together at the same time. You're absolutely right. If you could have a great customer experience vision for your organization, if you don't have the technology to make it happen, then you're not going to be able to provide that experience. Although at least at least now it matters to you
Yes.
that you don't have the right technology in place, right? Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's where companies have to start, right? Is to look at what is the function. And I think this is where HR can really help the business and be a great business partner, but to help the organization understand at its core, what is it that I need the employee to do? And what are the best tool sets that I can use to support them, right? And then you look at going back to your hiring equation, what are the skills and the competencies that they need? But ultimately, it could be um, those softer side of the cultural aspects. What do I need for attitude?
Mhm.
I have worked for some organizations that have not had great technology or very disparate, have a lot of things going on. I used to have one of my guiding principles when hiring individuals was I would ask them what their learning style was. And they
Mhm.
always kind of, were a little perplexed by the question, but ultimately I wanted to find out, were they an individual who was expecting an organization that could hand them a manual and from A to Z, everything you ever need to do is going to be written in this book and all you're going to do is follow the instructions? Or are you willing to go out and look for that information and help write the book? Because those are 2 different types of personalities that exist out there in the workplace. So when you bring, those aspects together, I think that's where ultimately there's an opportunity for HR to help with that technology piece. And even just looking at the tools that we give for HR, whether it be for benefits, whether it be for rewards and recognition or compensation or our 401ks, right? How do they how do we make that a better experience so that I'm not going to 5 or 6 or 7 different systems to try to find things out? How do we, get best to breed and better technology within the HCM space so that employees are not frustrated with the experience? That is probably one of the biggest things that I hear from buyers as well as employees is, I just don't want another system. And what
Yeah.
do they want? You go back to it. They want to be able to play and they want purpose. So if I am going to be able to bring those two things in, I need a technology that is integrated into the work that I do every day and not something standalone out to the side. So it's been
Yeah.
great talking. Great
Yeah, it's
conversation
been
today,
wonderful
Brent.
talking. I just looked at the time. Yeah, we could probably keep going, but great stuff, Theresa. Thanks so much for joining us. You got me thinking. And hey, join us again in the future. I'd love to have another one of these with you.
Yes, sounds great. Well, you have a wonderful day, Brent. Thanks for your time.
Take care. Thank you.
Uh,
Bye bye.
bye.